Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-chair of Denver Startup Week. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. DSW has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible, our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, our designer track sponsor, Battery 621, and the Public Works. People track sponsor, Exactly, and Spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to the week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage, Path, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors, all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use the hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experiences and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Hello, I'm Sal Gentili, CEO of Friday Health Plans, and we're proud to sponsor the growth track this year at Denver Startup Week. We're a company that just entered a rapid growth phase, so we felt it was particularly appropriate. When my business partner and I started Friday Health Plans 5 years ago, we knew we wanted to create a company that catered to people who bought their own health insurance. The Affordable Care Act was just getting going, and we saw an opportunity to serve a brand new market of health insurance consumers. Independent consultants, startup groups, gig workers, service industry workers, designers, creators, and other independent professionals, like many of you here today. We knew that if we built a health plan that was simple to buy, easy to use, had great customer service, and most of all was affordable, we could compete against the big insurance plans who only focus on serving big companies. After spending 5 years getting into the Colorado market and completing a successful proof of concept, we successfully closed a $50 million round of growth funding earlier this year. We're now about to expand to 3 additional states later this year, hire more than 400 employees to support our growth, and eventually be in more than 10 states by 2025. I wish each of you good luck in your startup and growth pursuits. And as you think about your upcoming health insurance needs, I hope you consider fellow growing startup Friday Health Plans. Open enrollment starts November 1st. Check us out at FridayHealthPlans.com.
Hello everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Jake Cohen, the Growth Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation. A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep Denver Startup Week free and accessible for all. Thank you for joining us and have a great week.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Paul Zach. I'm thrilled to be with you here at Denver Startup Week, and I am connecting to you in Heidelberg, Germany. Why would I be in Heidelberg, Germany? Like you, I'm a startup guy, and I'm here meeting clients and prospects around Europe for the next 5 weeks. So A couple of things. One is if I get some funky internet, just hang tight. If it doesn't work, it'll come back, I'm sure. And besides that, we're gonna have time for questions. So I want to go through some things that I hope will create value for you. And in doing so, we'll both learn something and hopefully make your startup more successful. So I am a founder of Immersion Neuroscience. I'll tell you a little about that towards the end. I'm also a professor at Claremont Graduate University, and I've spent most of my career studying the underlying neuroscience of human connection. Connection, who cares about that, right? I have a startup to run, I'm a tech person, I got to make this stuff happen. Well, actually, connection is essential because connection is how you get people to care about your baby, your startup, right? You put all this time and energy and money into it. You some cases mortgage your house. You have people depending on you for their jobs. You have investors. But how do you get people to get so excited about your baby as you are, right? And that includes investors, absolutely includes team members, and it's got to connect to clients. If you can't make this pitch to clients that what you're doing is better, cheaper, faster, whatever that ROI is for that, then you've lost the opportunity to grow your revenue and maintain your status as a startup rather than going bust. So you've got to get people to care about it. And there's the science of this. This is science that's been done in my academic laboratory. And I have this unique position in which I developed the science and then I've applied it to startups. So I'm on my fourth startup and I've applied the knowledge I've developed of basic science to trying to improve my startups. We're not a unicorn yet, so you take it for what it's worth, but I certainly spent 20 years identifying the underlying basis for connection, which tells us how to do this better. So to me, the science makes this efficient, right? So all kinds of things written about connection and pitching, whatever, but I want to actually take the science and expand it into a set of practical factors that you can use. Okay, so factor one is our brains are cost-benefit calculators, right? So the brain sucks up about 20% of your caloric intake, has very high overhead, and our body manages that high overhead by having our brains idle most of the time, right? We'll kick in and we'll go back to idle, right? So just like you work out a muscle, you stress the muscle and then you have recovery time. The brain does that, but at millisecond frequency scale. So if you are giving me a pitch as an investor, as a potential client, as a person you want to hire for your team, and that pitch is not powerful enough, my brain's gonna go, I'm just gonna sit back and chill, right? So that's not what you don't want to happen. You want people to be really engaged in what you're doing. You want their brains to kick in and go, holy crap, this is valuable, right? So the science of connection is the science of shared experience. And that's really important, right? So the way we understand this shared experience is that something becomes more valuable to us, right? So I really think it's a superpower to be able to be the world's best connector, or how about in the top 10% of the world's best connectors, right? So this is not just about having lunch with famous people. It's every day at your business with your colleagues, with your funders, with your clients or prospects, communicating in the most effective way possible. And there are going to be some surprises as we go through some of the science on this. Okay, so first of all, we're social creatures. What does that mean? It means that around 200,000 years ago, in the dawn of the Homo sapien era, there was a mutation in a gene that codes for a neurochemical called oxytocin, in which this neurochemical made us more sensitive to social information. So this enabled humans to live together in larger communities than just kin-based communities. So even today, if you look at many small-scale societies, they're primarily kin-based, right? So I know the people around me, they're related to me either by blood or by marriage, and that allows me to have greater certainty on what they're going to do. And so as we spread this gene, because it aided survival and reproduction, we became increasingly sensitive to social information. So that's the sense in which this cost-benefit calculator in the brain can be biased towards certain factors. And if you know those biases, you can play into them and have your prospect's brain say, be more excited about the information you're giving it, right? So around 10,000 years ago, we started living in larger and larger communities called civilizations. And there's a real benefit to having people live together, right? One is specialization of labor. So if you're good at something, you don't have to be good at lots of other things because you can trade. So that is the most natural thing for social creatures, and all kinds of other social creatures besides humans trade. And they also have specialization of labor, bees and ants and lots of other animals. Okay, so there are benefits to cooperation, but in the cost benefit calculator of the brain, there are also risks, right? I invest money in your startup, you may be a doofus, or you may be a criminal, or right, there's all kinds of things that my brain's trying to assess. You may tell me about the world's best new software that you've developed, but if that software does not perform the way it's expected to, then I feel like I'm a schmuck and I've been taken advantage of, right? So then that cost benefit calculation is taking how much benefit is here versus how much risk, right? So again, if we know this system, then I'm going to help you push on the benefit side and or reduce the risk side so that the brain sees the thing that you're pitching as more valuable. So lots of science behind this. You can go to Google Scholar and bazillions of papers will come up on stuff we published. A lot of work I've done has been on trust. And in fact, I was the first scientist to show that this neurochemical oxytocin is in fact released in the brain when someone trusts us. So the first aspect of connection is trust, right? So if you're coming at me with a knife, I think you're going to stab me, no connection is going to happen, right? I'm going to either run away or try to defend myself, or I don't know, stab you first, right? So trust is the underlying foundation of getting to that connection where I can do the cost benefit calculation in my brain. But this is all unconscious, right? I'm not saying you do this consciously. This is all unconscious. And that's why we had to run experiments for 20 years to figure this out. So anyway, lots of research, article in HBR called The Neuroscience of Trust, I think 2017. You can find it online for free, and lots of other stuff. And I've written some books as well. So the science is very well established at this point. So let's apply that science. So that's a picture of me in a village in the rainforest of Papua New Guinea. This is in the Western Highlands. So I've literally run these experiments around the world. I'm going to actually show you a little short film to show you how those experiments look. What we find across basically every culture on the planet is that good people have more opportunities to connect and collaborate, right? So in small scale societies, that means greater opportunity to collaborate to find resources, like take down big animals or farm collectively. And across, again, almost every culture in the world, with very few exceptions, what it means to be a good or virtuous or trustworthy person is very, very similar. So some anthropologists have said we should name ourselves, instead of Homo sapiens, the wise Homo, we should name ourselves Homo reciprocans. That is the reciprocating primate, right? So that's exactly what we found oxytocin does, right? So if you trust me and my brain sufficiently values that experience relative to the risk, then my brain releases oxytocin and I want to reciprocate and connect with you in return. So again, you've got to show that trust first before that connection happens. If you come in and yell at me, or we'll talk about the inhibitors of oxytocin release, you're not going to be an effective connector, right? And there's some very subtle subtle inhibitors that we'll talk about. So how do humans do this? Well, we have long memories, right? Much longer memories than almost any other animal. And we talk to each other as social creatures. So if Bob Smith, screws me over on a deal on some level, right, that word gets out. So one of the great things about the startup community in Denver and many other places is this idea that we've got to support each other. I think that's what Denver Startup Week is about, right? I want to be of service to these other startup founders because I know what they go through financially, emotionally, cognitively. It's really, really hard. And you can help others and learn from others by being of service to them. So that's the first thing, which is connecting to others. You've got to make the first step in a trustworthy way so that they want to reciprocate that, right? And then you start building a network. Okay, so all that basically I want to show you just briefly what one of these experiments looks like. This is the one in Papua New Guinea, but we've done these, again, in the US, Western Europe, all around, just to give you a sense, a short clip, just so you can kind of see what this looks like. Oh, this is Japanese. So I went to Papua New Guinea with the Japanese film crew. I'm a super cheap guy, and so when someone wants to fund an experiment and film it, I'm always happy to do it. So this is the village I was embedded in for a week. These are men who are getting ready to do a joint project to work together. So even in the rainforest, you have joint projects. And before they do that, they have this ritual. Basically, it's a dance they do, kind of a war dance that gets them primed to work together. Now, there's no running water, there's no electricity, there's no bathrooms. I have this hand crank centrifuge, so I'm gonna actually take blood from these guys before and after to measure changes in neurochemicals. So we built this tent in the rainforest. When it rains, it's like machine gun fire. It really hurts. And those flowers are put there by some of the indigenous people to make it nicer. And brought in generators and built a little medical tent here. And so these guys have never been to a doctor or dentist before, never seen their blood drawn. And here we are out in the rainforest taking blood from these dudes before and after they did this dance. So amazing experience. And the goal of this was to understand whether the underlying neural substrates of connection are in fact universal, right? If we only do this study in the US or in England or in France, then we don't really know if this system is universal. So extremely hard research to do, requires, bringing up all your supplies, liquid nitrogen, flying this home to my lab in California. So it took a ton of work to do this. But what did we find? The same mechanisms happen in Papua New Guinea as happen in Denver, happen in LA, and happen in Paris, which is this trigger, which is group activity, connecting to others, showing that you're willing to work, is the same mechanism in Papua New Guinea as every place else we've seen. So we have confidence in the findings, again, not just in publications, but you can see the kind of work that goes into this. So this is not my guesses. This is very well-established science. Okay, so a couple things before we kind of get to the takeaway. So the first is that oxytocin is a very ancient neurochemical. You can trace its origins back to fish at least 400 million years ago. So it's a variant in fish. And it does the same thing in fish. When this neurochemical or a version of this neurochemical is released, it allows other fish to get close to another fish. So this only happens in females when the female's eggs need to be fertilized, right? If that other fish gets too close to you, that male fish may eat the female, right? But with oxytocin, it reduces the physiologic stress of conspecific approach of another member of your species. It does exactly the same thing in humans, right? So if you can trigger oxytocin release in the brain when you're talking to other humans, you motivate them to approach and you will motivate them to reciprocate, right? So it has effects primarily in the brain, but also downstream. So oxytocin reduces our physiologic stress, and we should be stressed being around other people, particularly strangers, but everybody. We should be a little bit on guard. You never know, right? So it's relaxing. It wasn't studied before 20 years ago when my lab started doing this because it's a very fragile molecule. It breaks down very rapidly and has a very short half-life, about 3 minutes. So that means it's cleared from your bloodstream in 20-25 minutes. So this is a quick on-off, hey, this person's cool, you can approach him or her, right? Now it does some other really interesting things. We can also administer synthetic oxytocin into the human brain safely. I've done this personally myself about 700 times safely. Again, your brain is making this neurochemical, but to show causation, to show that oxytocin causes greater connection, greater reciprocation, greater willingness to work to help others, we administer this pharmacologically and can show that as well. So again, lots of science underneath this. Okay, so now the cool stuff, right? If business is connection, then oxytocin is the underlying neurochemical substrate of connection, right? Now, it does that by doing a couple interesting things. It increases our sense of empathy. What does that mean? That means that when my brain makes oxytocin, I am more sensitive to social information, right? And if I get someone else's brain to make oxytocin, they're more sensitive to my social information. They understand not only what I'm doing, but the empathy tells me why this is so important to me, right? So that's what you want to communicate in the pitch with your team members. Why this is so important. To do that, they have to understand your emotional state, right? This isn't yelling, this isn't histrionics. This is making a case that allows them to understand why what you're doing is so important to you, so valuable. So that value comes from the emotional response in the brain, right? So it's not a dollars and cents. It's, I really care about this. I'm committed to this company. I'm committed to this project. I'm committed to this client, right? So when you convey that commitment, then you can induce oxytocin release in others. So the second thing we've shown is that when the brain makes oxytocin, people will work to help others. Gosh, that's what I want from my startup, right? I need people to help me. I need people to network and suggest clients to me. I need people to invest in my company. I need discretionary effort from my employees and partners and founders, right? One of the beautiful things about startups is how hard people work for so little money. Yeah, may have some shares there, but push comes to shove, most startups are going to fail, right? So people are working because they believe in this, and that belief has got to come from particularly the founders and the leadership's emotional commitment to the project, to the company. Okay, so what we found from thousands of studies of people we've studied is about 92% have an intact oxytocin system. If you can convey that information properly, they will connect to you. And if you get their brain to make oxytocin, that connection will be strong enough that they're willing to help you. And that's super cool. So, okay, so we got 8% we got to talk about. Who are the 8%? So of that 8% that the oxytocin system's not working properly, 5 to 6% are people who are having really bad days. We'll talk about this in a minute. But high levels of stress inhibit oxytocin release and put us in survival mode, singular survival mode. I just want to get out of here because I'm so stressed out. So acute stress inhibits our ability to connect. So we're going to talk about this in a minute, but some stress is good, right? What we call challenge stress, right? We got something to work on. We got a goal. We know where we're going. We know the rules of the game. We're going to shoot for this thing. We're going to hit this milestone, right? We're in a sprint to get this thing done, right? That's all great. That motivates people. That motivates oxytocin release. That causes us to draw on our social resources to get that connection made. But if you go too far, if people aren't sleeping, if they're working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, at some point their brain would just burn out in the ability to connect, and then you see this cranky bad behavior, right? So again, you've got to kind of modulate this because the brain needs recovery just like a muscle. The other 2% we found have the traits of psychopaths. So what do psychopaths lack classically? Empathy, right? So they see people as a means to an end, not as someone who should be reciprocated, cared for, connected to. You're just a means to money, sex, drugs, whatever that is. And so it means you got 2% of people you interact with that you got to cut loose, right? When you start seeing these traits, you can't fix these people. Give them oxytocin all you want. It's not going to fix their brains because the receptors are all dysfunctional. The whole brain circuits are dysfunctional. So the takeaway here is if people are not connecting to you, you can think of a couple reasons for that. One is you're not projecting that sense of trust, safety. You're not creating an environment where people have the ability to connect. And that ability happens within a second or two, right? So it's very, very rapid, right? So if you're not connecting properly, if you're not getting people excited about what you're doing, then you've got to work potentially on the pitch on how you're connecting to others. But the second is, it's not going to work every time, right? So 5-6% of the people, they're just too stressed out, too unhappy, but we often attribute to those 5 or 6% what's called the fundamental attribution error. Bob didn't help me because he's a bad person, right? So what we really find in the data is that it's Bob as a good person who's having a bad day, right? His dog died, his, I don't know, his wife tossed him out of the house, his car broke down, whatever it is, he's having a bad day, he's cranky, he just doesn't have the ability to connect, but tomorrow he will, or the next day he will, right? So what I've learned from running neuroscience experiments for more than 20 years is to be really tolerant of the variation in the human condition. People are highly variable, right? Doesn't mean they're bad people. Often it's good people having a bad day. So try to avoid the fundamental attribution error. But again, just remember that 2% of the folks you run into, I don't want to point any fingers, but you know who you are. Those are psychopaths. They're in it for themselves. They're not going to help others. They're not going to be good team members. You can't remediate them. They got to go, and they got to go sooner rather than later. Okay. So here's the punchline for the science. The brain's oxytocin system is adaptive. So our brains are constantly adapting to our environments, and it does that by setting up biases, what are called pathways in the brain, default pathways, because it saves energy. So once I get used to connecting to people, then it becomes easier to connect, right? So that happens generally the course of 3 to 6 months. If I'm focused on being a better connector, then my brain starts to establish these pathways. It becomes easier and easier. So case in point, I'm a super nerd, man. I am introverted, but I spent a lot of time in my life learning how to connect to people. And now I love connecting to people. I'm in Heidelberg by myself. I'm talking to strangers. I'm talking to people I had a guy on the train out from Frankfurt this morning, buy me a drink. Just chat me a water, but like we're chatting in the compartment. He's like, oh, you want a drink? I'm like, yeah, sure. And bought me a drink just because I think I'm a nice connector, right? So I showed I was safe. I was very friendly. And so that's good connection. So if a dumb nerdy person like me can do it, then anybody can do it. Okay. And again, lots of variations. Some people do this much more easily than others. So, but part of that is service, right? Connecting, asking questions, being genuinely interested in others. And so from the brain perspective, you can fake it till you make it, but human beings, because we're so sensitive to social information, are quite good at picking up people who are faking it. So try to genuinely be interested in other people. And again, you've got to give the gift of openness, of authenticity, of being genuine to get that oxytocin release, to get that connection, right? So you really have to care about their needs. And I do think all of business is about service. It's about service to others. It's a very noble endeavor to dedicate your life to helping other people with their problems. That's why they're paying you. There's nothing wrong with getting paid for solving a problem. And it's just a wonderful thing. So if you think of your life as a life of service to your employees, to your clients, to your investors, then you'll have that gratitude, that openness, that genuineness that facilitates better connection. And the more you do it, the better it gets. Okay, so now what stops this system from happening? High levels of stress and anxiety, right? So we talked about chronic stress before. The neurochemical substrate of that's called epinephrine, sometimes called adrenaline. So one way to manage that is to slow down. So you can already tell I'm excitable, I talk fast, I think fast, and sometimes I run over people. I'm going too fast. So slow it down. Take the time to establish the relationship before you either offer service or ask for help, right? Take some time to get to know that person. And time could be a couple of minutes. I'm not talking days and weeks here, but slow it down, right? Focus on the personal, authentic connection that you're trying to make, and then come in and ask for help. Okay, number 2, competition and hierarchy. So one of the most potent inhibitors of oxytocin release is testosterone. So if you pit your employees against each other, you've gone from oxytocin cooperating with each other to them fighting with each other to keep their job, right? So this was the mistake that Jack Welch made and others at General Electric. This rank and yank is a very bad idea. What you want is in-group cooperation, but out-group competition. So competition, again, is a stressor, and moderate stress promotes oxytocin release. It's just the very high levels of stress and chronic stress that inhibit it. So you want, again, out-group competition, in-group cooperation, but hierarchy does it as well. So we see sometimes, particularly when startups start to grow and become successful, is what I call status displays. All of a sudden, the founders or the folks with a lot of stock show up in a really nice car, or their clothes are nicer, or whatever those status displays are, gold chains, I don't know, whatever people do, buy a boat, right? So to the extent that you are contributing as much or more as everybody else, let them see you. Let them see you get your hands dirty. Be one of the team. So if you have polos with your company name on it, Wear your polo, don't wear the fancy suit. And I think in startup world, suits are pretty much gone anyway, but really think about the difference in status of place. Even where you sit at a table, we're having a meeting, even if you're the founder or the CEO, why are you at the head of the table? Sit at the back. You can still contribute. You can run the meeting from the back, or let some junior person run the meeting, get them trained up, right? Start to establish a growth path for additional leadership. So really think about reducing status of place, because that puts in that competition, reduces the ability to connect. And again, you say, well, it doesn't matter because it's with my employees, but yeah, you're training your brain, right? Here's the trick. The more you actually are one of the team, then you also connect better to clients, to investors. Okay, so genetics. Some people are just absolutely warm, wonderful connectors. They don't have to think about it. They don't need to be trained. They don't need to listen to me. If that's you, gosh, God bless you. You're really good at that. I wish I was. I have to work at it. So these empaths, maybe about 5% of the population, people who cry at movies, right? They're super warm. They tend to have a lot of friends. They're super sensitive to social information. They also suffer because if people around them are unhappy, they will pick up that unhappiness. But if you see these people, see how they interact with others. So we have some folks in my company, Immersion Neuroscience, who are just naturally warm connectors. And man, you go on a sales call with them or do a Zoom with them, and they're just so good. So copy them, right? They have this innate ability, or maybe a learned ability, that maybe some of us don't have, who are more techie people. And see what they're doing, see how they spend their time, see what language they use, look at their body language, all those things that tell them that, tell others that they're a very warm person. Okay, and we talked about the 2% who are psychopaths. They're dangerous. You can't fix them. Send them home, get rid of them. By the way, I'm a big believer in firing customers. You got a customer who is sucking your time out, cut them loose, man, you don't have time, right? So either they're a great fit, they're kind of ideal customer for you. If they're burning phone calls and not sending you money, then they gotta go. Okay, so I wrote a book a couple years ago called Trust Factor, about building high trust, high performance organizations. I want to show you a little data so you have some takeaways. So what we showed in this work, which is about 10 years worth of research, is that employees who work at high trust and high purpose organizations enjoy their jobs more. They put in more discretionary effort. So I'm going to talk a little about purpose here. So purpose within your startup gives people a reason to connect, gives you goals. Purpose is why we're doing what we're doing, right? So I call that transcendent purpose. There's another kind of purpose, which is transactional purpose. How we do it, the processes we build, super important. Without efficient processes, there's no way you can grow and scale, right? But transcendent purpose is why the heck we're here, right? So that gives us a sense of meaning, why we're actually putting so much effort in, not just to get stock options or get a better job or make more money, but we're doing something to service the world, all right? And that's a noble endeavor. And so let's talk about some data from this to show you the ROI of this. So here's the kind of algorithm that we look at. So psychological safety is that ability to be calm enough to form connections, right? So if you don't have psychological safety, then you don't have the ability to trust. If you don't have trust, you're not going to connect. When you combine trust and purpose, I'm connecting. Here's why, purpose. Wow, now I got the double whammy. This is when I really get high discretionary effort. And what we find, predicted by the neuroscience, but not predicted by standard economics, is that people working in high trust, high purpose organizations love what they do. They put in extra effort when they don't have to. They have great satisfaction from their jobs, and those organizations perform better. So if you remember from Economics 101 or whatever, what do they call this? The disutility of labor. It sucks so bad to work, we got to pay you and then monitor you because you hate it. Not in the startup land, right? I mean, some things suck. Let's be clear, but right, we do this because we love it. We get turned on by it. We are emotionally connected to it. And so I think looking at work through the lens of neuroscience tells us that we're group creatures. We want to be together. We want to work on projects. We will do that very effectively when we trust the people around us, can connect them, and we know why the heck we're doing it. Okay, so here's some data. So when we compare a representative sample of US working adults who work in the top quartile of the highest trust organizations compared to those in the lowest quartile, we see less chronic stress. We see double the energy at work. for high trust employees, higher productivity, people enjoy their jobs more, much higher job retention, really important. You got to keep your high performers, and then more alignment with the organization's purpose, greater job satisfaction. We see more innovation. Is innovation important in startups? Absolutely. So if you want people to innovate, you've got to create a culture, an environment where they can connect and feel safe around others, so that inevitably, when a mistake happens, when something fails, they're not being yelled at, they're not being punished, right? So certainly in many startup communities, I'm sure in Denver, but also in Silicon Valley where I live, people celebrate mistakes. It's every month, congratulations, you screwed up, pizza and beer party. Let's talk about all the stuff we screwed up this month. Share the information so no one else does it, and then recognize individuals for trying their best to innovate. Doesn't always happen. If you innovate, you're going to make mistakes for sure, right? That's the cost of innovation. You don't want those to be, critical or fatal mistakes. But if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. Then lastly, which I like a lot, fewer sick days. And people work in high trust organizations are more satisfied with their lives overall, right? They're better parents, they're better citizens, they're better partners. That's great because they're not getting beat up at work. They're getting that positive feedback, that satisfaction from doing something right. And the size effects are large. So a couple slides for the nerds like me. We look at the correlation, which is R between job satisfaction and trust, very strong, highly statistically significant. We look at closeness to colleagues in high trust organizations, that's connection, strong positive correlation. Same thing for purpose, increases job satisfaction, increases closeness to colleagues. So here's the takeaway, 10% increase in trust gives you a 4.5% increase in job satisfaction, 4% greater closeness to colleagues. Those are two factors that keep people working for you. Those high performers that you want to keep in your organization, it's not money. Usually, very few people quit for more money, right? Unless it's a ton more. Usually, it's I hate my boss, I don't like the people I work with, I think my job is not going anywhere, right? So if you can increase trust, you're going to get these two important benefits that keep people providing that discretionary effort and keep them working for you and not going somewhere else. Same thing with purpose. So purpose increases both job satisfaction and closeness to colleagues. Wonderful double whammy. Satisfaction with life. I think it's really important that we understand that people are in startup world because they want to have better lives. It sort of sucks in the beginning. It's hard, too many hours, too much uncertainty. It's hard, but we find that satisfaction with life, which is a standard measure used for the last 30 years in positive psychology, is actually associated with, as I said earlier, greater trust, greater purpose. So again, nice positive correlation. The greater trust I have in my organization, the more I enjoy my life. If I enjoy my life, I come back to work refreshed. I have energy, I'm ready to go, right? So again, there's this positive feedback loop between the professional side and the personal side. What about the stuff that causes people to quit or not work well? Chronic stress, big factor why people quit their jobs. And we find that trust reduces chronic stress pretty profoundly, reduces depersonalization, where you treat others like an object, not a person. Purpose does the same thing, similar effect sizes. So you can see the data here. So these effect sizes are strong. So when you start thinking about the ROI from connection, it's extraordinarily high because it doesn't take a lot to create an environment in which your employees, your customers, and your investors are all on the same page. We know why we're doing it, purpose, and we are around people that we can rely on, that depend on us, and we depend on them. So again, lots of ways you can increase trust and purpose in the organization. I'm going to give you a couple of examples and then some takeaways. So let's look at some transcendent purpose statements. So a couple that I like. To help you thrive, for Kaiser Permanente. So the you here is very interesting to me, right? So which you is it, right? You is that ambiguous term in English. Is it the employees? So helping employees thrive, helping the customers thrive, customers/patients? I mean, it's a wonderfully, perfectly designed, ambiguous statement, right? So if you are working on, internal organization, yes, Kaiser should be helping their employees thrive, right? If they're not, they're going to quit. Quits are very expensive. They're going to lose folks, but they also should be focused on having their patients/customers thrive as well. Another nice use of that U, YOU, is JetBlue, you above all. Well, that's a really nice kind of vague statement. You above all, because you're flying, you're above everybody else, but we're putting you above everybody else too. We want to treat you like a king or queen, right? And that you, again, could apply to employees. And lastly, LinkedIn, I think, has a great one. Very clear. They use it as a screen to decide whether they should take on new projects, connecting the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. Right. So really clear. And those are measurable, right? I can measure productivity on LinkedIn. I can measure success, right? I can look at your job changes. I can impute what kind of salary you're getting, right? So I can assess both those things. So again, for purpose statements, those really have to be lived. So what Kaiser, JetBlue, and LinkedIn all do is it's everywhere. It's on the tip of the tongue of employees. They know it, they live it. It's part of the DNA. So it's got to be part of the DNA of your startup as well, if you're going to harness the value of a purpose to facilitate connection. Right? That purpose is that moderate stressor that says, hey, we got to be good at this. We are not helping people thrive. We're not putting you above all. We're not making our members more successful and or productive. So the lived purpose statement is really important. Okay, so let's talk about some measurement tools, right? So we have a really wonderful 10,000 foot view of the science. How do I do this? Right. So I'm going to talk about this for the next 10 minutes, and then I'll take a couple questions. So again, connection directly drives productivity. People work together in teams. We're social creatures. That's what we do. So if I want you to be productive as a social creature, then I've actually got to measure how well you're connecting. So my company Immersion does that. So I'll tell you just a little about that. There are other technologies out there. I would say not as good. People may disagree, but just for the one I know the best, I'm going to tell you just a little about it. Again, the brain is assigning value to experiences. So experiences involve other people, involve advertisements, movies, whatever that is, training. But any experience with a social component will be weighed in the brain on whether the brain should kick in and fully engage with that experience. We call that immersion, that neurologic state where I'm sucked in, I'm fully committed to it. It's driven largely by the release of oxytocin, some other neurochemicals as well. And so that oxytocin release tags that experience as important. And that's what I want when I'm connecting. The innovation in our company is that rather than have you hooked up with wires and an EEG or put you on an MRI scanner, although we've done all that work, we've now are able to pull data from a smartwatch, and we wrote algorithms that let us infer the activity of the cranial nerves that tell us what the brain's doing. So newsflash, your brain controls your heart largely. Your heart has a little bit of a closed loop feedback in there, but largely the heart's controlled by the brain. So we can feed in heart rate and we can infer what the brain's doing by very subtle changes in the way the heart reacts to different stimuli. And so anyone's got a smartwatch or a fitness wearable, we can actually measure second by second in real time, cloud-based software, the value they're assigning these experiences, and that value directly drives connection, right? So our CEO of Immersion, Scott Brown, on Monday in Denver Startup Week, did an amazing session in which people gave pitches and they measured immersion in real time to assess how effectively they were connecting to other people. So that's another application of this technology. But again, knowing what to do and measuring whether you're doing it well are two different things. Or you might ask somebody, how was my pitch? Are my employees really committed? But what are people going to say? No, you suck because whatever. Or can you get objective neurologic second by second data to capture what's really objectively happening? That's the real innovation here. So again, other ways to do this. What we've done on the platform is measure those antecedents to connection. The first, as I mentioned, is psychological safety. This is data from one of our stand-ups, I think a couple of weeks ago. And we can look at across all these individuals, psychological safety in, I think, 5-second blocks here. Here's an agenda for that. We can compare psychological safety for in-person to remote. The platform has about 50,000 brains on it. So this is all benchmarked. So it automatically tags this as green, super, you're super safe, you're comfortable. Gray is you're around the average, it's fine. And then red, actually people are anxious, they're getting checked out. So one way to think about anxiety is bandwidth, right? If I'm anxious, then my brain is processing all kinds of other things, and I don't have enough bandwidth to absorb the information, to connect to other people. All the things that make me an effective employee are going to be blunted because I'm burning a lot of this scarce metabolic energy just trying to hang on for the next 10 minutes. So I mean, this is real data, and it's not the most flattering data. We're not doing a great job on the remote employees. We need to do better. So, one thing we are looking at now is really having people come together more often. We're all doing hybrid work, but these are pretty profound, right? Across this half an hour meeting, right? We are really getting great psychological safety. Little dip here at the very end. I can't read. My screen is just too small. The font's too small for me to read it. But whatever this little section was, people were a little bit checked out or a little bit stressed out. But the remote people are going from average to not so great, and that's something we have to work on, honestly. But having that data means that we know that we need to work on it. And then lastly, job satisfaction is driven by immersion. If I'm really sucked into an experience, neurologic immersion is kind of like flow, the psychological state of flow. It's a bit different because it's neurologic state, it's a little more broad. But if you are digging what you're doing, if you're having a great time, then we can measure that as well. And so again, this is the same set of people from our Tuesday stand-up. And you see starts out a little rough, and then people are really connecting, right? They're into this experience. Again, this is just our stand-up. So, but we're still talking about work, right? This is still about facilitating what we're going to do that day. And in person, pretty darn good, right? A little bit of red in the beginning, and then greens and grays, and then remote, not so good, right? So that's a problem. So give me about 4 more minutes. I'll have time for questions. We've got plenty of time in this session to take questions. So just having that measurement is important. So again, knowing what to do and being able to do it, the being able to do it requires